Hi everyone, thank you for coming and joining to talk about consent and what that looks like. I know that this topic can be quite confusing to talk about, but it's also a little bit difficult. So I just want to remind you to go at your own pace with any of this stuff. If something feels like it's too much at the moment, feel free to stop, come back if you want to, or you don't have to come back, of course. But if you need to speak to a counselor, then please reach out to the Counseling Center at 404-413-1640. So we have our consent laws, and this is specific to the state of Georgia. Laws vary among states, but to start off with the first one there, a person must be over the age of 16. So different states have different laws about consent. For example, Tennessee and Florida, the consent law is 18. But here in Georgia, it's 16 in order to give a consent. The law is protecting individuals who are under a certain age, and it applies even if the person they are dating is in close age. The law considers the age at which the person is physically and mentally able to give consent. If a person engages in a sexual act with a person below the age of consent, that is illegal. The person below the minimum age is considered the victim, and the other person is considered the perpetrator. So a person cannot be intoxicated. A person must be sober to give consent. If an individual is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they do not have the ability to give consent and make an informed decision. So no coercion through force or weapon. You cannot give consent if you are afraid for your life. If somebody has a gun to your head. So this includes repeatedly asking someone if they want to have sex until they say yes. So that's not consent. Even though you kept saying no, 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 that final yes, that's still not consent. And again, it's just an individual still may be afraid for their life whether or not a weapon is used. If someone is an authority over you or authority over another person, then the subordinate person can't give consent. This extends to police officers, doctors, counselors, teachers, a boss, etc. So there's a lot of areas where you could not give consent just based on the power dynamic in the relationship. So if an individual gave consent at one time, it does not mean that that person has consent forever. So that consent can be retracted at any given point during a sexual act, even if it's during a sexual act, or at any other point afterwards. So a person must be conscious to communicate consent. You can't be physically helpless. You have to be able to communicate that you are wanting to have sex. You have to have that verbal consent. And also, consent to one act does not equal consent to all acts. So this goes back that you can withdraw your consent at any time, but just because you want to make out doesn't mean that you want to have sex with someone. So that's kind of the same mindset here. So one consent doesn't equal all consent. A person must be mentally competent. They can't give consent. So a certain disability that might prevent understanding would be something like dementia. So even if they seem to want to kiss you in that moment or enjoy it, but they don't have the mental wherewithal to kind of fully understand what's going on. So a yes is needed in order to give consent. Just because someone doesn't say no, it doesn't mean that that's okay, that they are agreeing to it. If a no is said, it's not It doesn't need to be like a no and a hard no. Even if it's a passive no, like no, no, that's still no. And so even the tone of your voice, it does not matter. If you said no, you said no. But ideally, even if you didn't say no, the yes still needs to be heard. Informed consent is needed. So this goes back to if somebody has an STI or an STD, that information needs to be given up front because that's part of making an informed decision. You need to talk about what types of birth control are you using. If someone is not using a certain birth control, maybe the other individual does not want to have sex with them. So if condoms aren't being used, maybe then that's a discussion that you guys have. But it just, as long as each party knows what, or parties know what they're getting into, that's kind of what informed consent looks like. So I'm going to move on to definitions now. So the definition for rape in the state of Georgia is penetration of the female sex organ by the male sex organ. This is the legal definition in Georgia. But I want to be clear, because even though this is legal, a man can rape a man, a female can rape female, female to man, like all those through oral or anal penetration, like that would be considered rape. And it is considered rape in other states. And if you're thinking about it from a mental health perspective, all of those would be considered rape. Unfortunately, the law has not caught up with today's times. It takes a really long time for laws to be made and changed. But again, this is not to delegitimize your experience. And you can work with a mental health professional to kind of validate your trauma and provide you a nurturing environment and safe environment to explore what that means to you. So aggravated sexual battery. So sexual battery is a person intentionally making a physical contact with the intimate parts of another person's body without their consent. Intimate parts are considered to be primarily genital area, anus, groin, inner thigh, butt of a male, or and the breast of a female. Aggravated assault is a person intentionally penetrating with a foreign object to a sexual organ or anus of another person without their consent.
Hello everyone, thank you for continuing to watch this video. My name is Nissa and I will be talking through the next few slides related to Denim Day and myths surrounding sexual assault. So what is Denim Day? In 1992, an 18-year-old girl in Italy had her jeans removed and was raped by a perpetrator. Initially, this perpetrator was arrested and convicted of rape, yet years later he appealed the conviction, claiming that they had consensual sex. The Italian Supreme Court chose to overturn the conviction and the perpetrator was released. They argued that because the victim was wearing very tight jeans, she must have helped him remove them, and therefore it was not rape, but consensual sex. Enraged by the verdict, the women in the Italian parliament launched a protest wearing jeans on the step of the Supreme Court, and this eventually launched the worldwide Denim Day in April of 1999. So as that previous case highlighted, there can be a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings surrounding sexual assault. So let's talk through some of the most common ones. Some of these myths surrounding sexual assault perpetrate victim blaming and victim shaming. The stigma around sexual assault can make it more difficult for people to process and work through the trauma. So the first myth is that it's the victim's fault. I want to note that it does not matter what the person was wearing, whether they were being flirtatious, whether they consented to other sexual acts, how much they had to drink or what substances they used, or where they were located, whether they were in the assailant's apartment, in an alleyway, etc. It is never the person's fault for being sexually harmed. The next one is the myth that victims must fight back. So there's a misconception that if they didn't fight back, it can't be sexual assault. There are many reasons why a victim might not physically fight their attacker, including shock, fear, threats, or the size and strength of their attacker. The threat of violence alone is often sufficient cause for a person to submit to the rapist to protect themselves from physical harm. The third myth is that men can't be raped or sexually assaulted. Men can be and are raped or sexually assaulted. Rape and sexual assault of men is underreported, but any man can be sexually assaulted regardless of their size, strength, sexual orientation, or appearance. The next myth is that rape and sexual assault only occurs among strangers. So most sexual assaults are committed by someone that the victim knows. Studies show that approximately 80% of women reporting sexual assaults knew their assailants. And then the last myth is that most rapes or sexual assault accusations are false. Reported sexual assaults are true with very few exceptions. FBI crime statistics indicate that only 2% of reported rapes are false, and this is the same rate of false reporting as any other major crime reports.
So in this section, we'll share a few statistics as they relate to sexual assault. Here are a few bullet points from the 2010 summary report from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, which states that nearly 1 in 5 women, about 18%, and 1 in 71 men, about 1.4%, in the United States will have been raped at some point in their lives. Approximately 51.1% of female victims of rape have also reported being raped by an intimate partner, and or 40.8% by an acquaintance. For male victims, more than half, about 52.4%, reported being raped by an acquaintance and 15% by a stranger. Additionally, this report also shared that estimated 13% of women and 6% of men have experienced sexual coercion in their lifetime, which defined as unwanted sexual penetration after being pressured in a non-physical way, with 27.2% of women and 11.7% of men having experienced this unwanted sexual contact. And now, given all that we have shared regarding statistics, consent laws, and sexual assault myths, we also do want to talk about working through this trauma. Here are a couple considerations. While this PowerPoint does focus on consent, rape, and aggravated sexual battery, sexual trauma can be endured through other acts, such as another person exposing their private parts to you or being peeped on. If you are uncomfortable defining your experience as rape, you can also define it as sexual assault, non-consensual sex, etc. I think it's very valid. Sometimes, words have meaning, right? And sometimes words we choose to describe our experience can also assist us with working through this trauma. Working through sexual trauma can be an emotional process, right? We advise that it's probably best to work with a trained mental health professional, an individual or through group counseling sessions to provide some support and assist with processing the event or a series of events. Relying on your support system can also be truly invaluable through this process. So reaching out to people you trust can also be immensely helpful, but also keeping in mind that working with a licensed clinician has also some of its own specific nuanced benefits. Writing in a journal Meditating, going on a walk can also help individuals work through their trauma through meaningful, small meaningful steps, and kind of working through individual reflection. Some people may also start to doubt their intuition, however, or may feel shame about their trauma. So recognizing that you are not alone with these feelings is also very critical. Understand that the incident is in no way your fault. Lastly, I will share that in time, reconnecting with yourself and the activities that you used to enjoy will also be important in the process of working through trauma. It is a long process and requires a lot of patience and grace with yourself, and also some coordinated efforts to find the right resources and support in order to get through and to work through trauma, particularly through sexual trauma.
GSU offers limited individual and couples counseling and unlimited group counseling. Additionally, we offer psychiatric services. We have a 24-hour crisis support line, which is at 404-413-1640. Student Victim Assistance provides confidential assistance whether or not the student chooses to report for GSU students who have experienced sexual assault, relationship violence, stalking, or any other crime. They also provide direct and virtual crisis intervention, referrals to on and off campus resources, and ongoing follow-up and support. 24-hour victim assistance can be found at 404-413-1965, victimassistance.gsu.edu. Student Health Promotion has many resources and services to support you, such as free STI and HIV testing, online sexual assault prevention education, workshops, and safer sex kits. Together All is an app and website, which is an anonymous community where members can support one another. There's 24-hour access all day long. Trained professionals are also available. There are so many different things that you can use, such as different self-assessments and resources. Some of my personal favorites are the different courses and class content that you can actually go through, which just has an amazing amount of resources available. So there are a lot of great tools, and this is free for all Georgia State students. This slide contains a lot of useful information and contact information and phone numbers. So first, the National Sexual Assault Hotline is 1-800-656-HOPE or 1-800-656-4673. Additionally, the Grady Rape Crisis Center offers a sexual assault nurse examiner, counseling, and support groups to help people undergoing sexual trauma. Their crisis phone number is 404-616-4861, or their admin phone number where you could call to book an appointment or just speak to someone generally is 404-616-3521. Finally, please complete an evaluation form to let us know how we did. Any and all feedback is helpful. Thank you.